Today we're going to take a look at the differences between Alliance and Horde in Season of Discovery. Yesterday I made a tweet showcasing basically the difference in damage from Alliance to Horde, but that wasn't showing the whole picture at all, and we need to clarify a ton of things. Because there should be a difference between the factions, and one faction, while it does have a lot more damage potential for most players, the other faction has a ton more healing, making the raids a lot easier and potentially allowing you to bring one less healer and filling that spot with a DPS. And lastly, this is supposed to be an objective conversation talking about the differences between the factions, which it's a seasonal server. It's not a big deal, even if I or other people might get worked up about it. It only ever matters to the top 1%, but it could be an easy way to explain if you're seeing yourself do a lot less damage than someone else. So let's get into all of that right now. So Horde in OG Classic were actually stronger until about AQ, where Kings starts to outscale having Wind Fury. That is not the case anymore because everyone has Kings. Now there's a huge difference in Alliance. This is the TLDR at the beginning. Alliance have more healing because Paladin healers are insanely strong, but Horde on some classes are losing up to 450 DPS per class, and on other ones it's around 150 DPS, and we'll look at that. And I'm not really talking about the racials. Again, at the beginning, TLDR is going to be probably a boomkin angle. Let's look at Alliance versus Horde, and we're going to look at it from like a raw angle. And the big reason, the new reason, the first one, there's three major reasons. The first one for DPS is that Grace of Air Totem and also Strength of Earth Totem are giving you strength and agility, which both get buffed by Kings because everyone now has Kings with Heart of the Lion. So both of these get buffed by Kings versus improved Blessing of Might, which gives just melee attack power, which we'll get into again as well. So first of all, if we're looking at Warrior, I don't even have the Warrior API absolutely perfect. This is the base one. I have the APIs for Hunter and Rogue set up, but we're just going to look at Warrior to give an example. So if we go Warrior, we go to, and I chose Tauren to be as unbiased as possible. But if we go to whatever, Night Elf, who cares? And you're not going to have that. You're just going to have Blessing of Might, Kings, and make sure everything's there. Perfect. In a 90-second fight, Warrior on Alliance without any changes is going to be 3,985 DPS. This is going to be a very good Warrior, by the way. Most Warriors won't pull off all of the damage. Now we're going to go to Tauren to be objective, where we are not looking at Orc racial. So Tauren just by getting the agility, right? Tauren's just by getting the totems. Okay, so 100 DPS there from getting the totems. Perfect. Racials, honestly, Blizzard warned everybody in SoD that racials would be a thing at the very beginning. So like complaining about racials is like a non-existent factor. Like thinking about that is like being a baby, right? Like that's another 50 DPS, but this is only running 3,000 simulations. It's more like 120 DPS for Warriors being Horde. And this gap will get bigger, right? Because if you have a percentage difference, like if Horde is 5% better at phase 1 of level 60, once you get stronger and stronger, that 5% will still stay at 5%, but the number of damage will go up a large amount. Horn of Lordaeron was actually removed from the game, and that is a great point, Radiator. Horn of Lordaeron was removed from the game, I believe, which would actually fix that singular issue, the totem issue. Horn of Lordaeron coming back. There's 3 issues. Four technically because of the healing thing, so we're going to talk about all of them, but the first one is totems. So Horde of Lordaeron would fix this because you can use Horn of Lordaeron and then Kings would buff Horde of Lordaeron, but it was removed from the game, which wasn't really as much of an issue. I mean, I say that from my own personal bias because I was playing a Hunter, and Hunters scaled on melee attack power in an awkward way, and they thought they would be able to weave, but weaving is not a thing unless Blizzard fixed traps, which would be sick. But Horde of Lordaeron is not in the game anymore. It was removed. I'm not exactly sure the reasoning for it being removed. I think it was just being replaced with another rune that they thought was better, and I think it was a rune that was better. I'm not a Paladin main, but the person who actually spurred me having this conversation and doing a lot of research into it was Holy Palace Sway, who's like literally the best Paladin and maybe one of the best healers in the world. Absolutely. He brought this up. Okay, so first of all, let's just look. All right, just as a warrior, let's say from going Alliance to Horde, 150 DPS per warrior. We'll do a sheet. Let's be real. You're gonna go orc or troll. So what would the difference with troll be? Why would you be troll? I don't know. Some people would do it. And troll's better for like everything now. Troll, because of the racial changes, troll is actually the best. So all right, let's put low end 150, right? Warrior 150. Okay. All right. And I know there's sims like literally Atos has figured out that he can get on like a 30-second fight on warrior, like 8,000 DPS, which then it'll be a much different situation. Let's look at rogue. Okay. We're gonna go to mutilate rogue, talents, mutilate, rotation, mutilate. Let's look at mutilate rogue. And this is playing orc. We're gonna go to human, night elf. Night elf technically has more agility, so we're going to night elf. And we're gonna go improve blessing of might of stormwind, of course. Let's give you boggling root and the jujus I don't care about, and give you the sigil. Let's just say flat out like this first. Okay, so it's gonna be a similar situation going horde for rogue, right? We'll go troll would be sweet. Okay, that, no jujus, this resistance doesn't matter. All right, okay, 113, 114 DPS, right? But the big change for Horde is that Storm Strike, which you can't see because of my face is covering it. Storm Strike, the 20% nature damage debuff, is pretty much up 100% of the time for Horde, and it is gonna be very rare to see it on Alliance. Now, right now, the world's #1 speedrun has a boomkin. That's going to be a very rare occurrence when things get really honed in, because boomkins aren't that great. Unfortunately, they need to be buffed for sure. Probably one of the weakest classes, and we'll look at like the classes. So most of the time playing Alliance, you don't have a boomkin, which means now you are losing. Let's go back to, sorry, human, no nature buff, might. Now as Alliance, you're losing about 300. This is where we're save. Sorry. Save this. Now go Horde. Orc, everything, and get a buff. And perfect. All right. So now as an Alliance, rogue, 500 DPS for most people, right? 500 DPS for most rogues. Just from that, ideally, eventually boomkins get buffed, so it's not a huge thing. But because of how large this is and how good rogues are, you might have to then bring a boomkin slot, which again is more preference to Horde, but just say it's not 500, it's 492 or whatever that was. All right. And Hunter, it'll be pretty much the same thing. Hunter Alliance, Hunter Horde, true shot, similar thing, 500 DPS. Okay. Again, this part mostly matters only to the top % of players. If your guild has a boomkin in it, then you are not seeing a difference in your DPS, only 100-ish DPS from not having totems, but it's not nearly as large as for rogues and hunters, very specifically because of the lack of boomkin representation in a lot of raids. Again, only for the top % of players, so don't stress about this. It's not a big deal for most people, but I'm trying to keep you all informed. The difference though is Alliance have paladins, which paladin healer is literally -1 healer, at least right now. It's probably going to come down to it where both Alliance and Horde are running the same amount of healers, but paladin heals is like one paladin healer carries an entire raid. Paladin healer is so strong. So the difference that would come down to, would it be more DPS to drop a healer or to lose 500 DPS on every single target fight? Now, that's also thinking purely single target, because a run that matters is overall damage. The Horde gains half the mana as ally. I'm not completely forgetting that either, Peanut, which is only this phase. Last phase, Horde gained like 3 times the mana. But yes, Horde gain less mana than Alliance. Is that a buff in fighting bosses? No, because bosses die so fast. Literally, bosses die so fast. It doesn't do anything. You can chug green mana pots. It's not a buff for anyone in DPS wise. It's literally not a buff for anyone DPS wise. So you're losing. Let's even look at just this raid. You'd be 1, 2, 2 hunters, which would be on single target, purely single target. If I go to like a single target boss, Oh, this is crank. This is crank. Lose 500 DPS here. Oh, you guys can't see it. All right, 3,600 DPS. If you lose 500 DPS here, 400 DPS here for top end angle, 100 to 20, 300 DPS here, 120. This would probably be a feral druid. So would both of these guys. Ferals are good right now, Julie. That is a fair point. Gain a little bit of damage instead of losing damage from these characters. 300 probably here, 350 here, 100 here. Is that all worth one extra healer? Cutting one healer? No. So if you want to parse, just go Horde. That's an easy answer. But if you want to have an easy raid, play Alliance. For most Alliance raids, you don't get Dream State. Now, there's the argument that like just bring a Boomkin, but then again, Boomkins are not very great, if we're being honest, and that is a major issue. Boomkins that's like sacrificing a spot or choosing player over class or bringing them for utility. But once things get changed, they'll get brought out. And feral druid or resto druids also will be phased out, especially on Alliance side. Great on Horde, but on Alliance side, obviously that's the one you drop because you have Paladin, who is like crazy. On Alliance side, just don't bring rogues. Can still do really well. You need just God RNG, but you're even with God RNG, you would just do a lot more on better Alliance, right? Either way, if you're playing Alliance and like you're struggling to get a 99 or a 95 or whatever, just know you probably are missing like 20% of your damage. Probably. You have to check it because debuffs are the biggest things in the game. Debuffs are like where all of your damage comes from, debuffs and buffs, and you're missing the biggest ones. If you're a hunter or rogue, if you're a normal melee class, you're probably missing like, I don't know, what, 5% of your damage. Like, get over it. But that 5% of damage throughout the whole raid adds up because then it's shorter fights, which adds up. And then 20% for the hunters and rogues, right? So it's like a huge loss for them. But on the flip side, you have more healing, which as a casual raid makes it easier, but there's not a lot of damage that goes out in the raid. Does this affect casters? Not really. No. What about camp T-buffs? Those are always a thing. Like every Alliance that's ever made an Alliance character should have known that they have to compete with camp T-buffs.